A 5-year-old boy was shot dead on Friday night after his father's bakkie was hijacked outside their home in Soshanguve in the north of Gauteng. According to Sowetan Live, police spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Mavela Masondo said the child had gone out to welcome his father when he arrived home around 10:30 in the evening. For analysis, we're now joined by crime and security analyst Willem Els. Willem, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Now, the country woke up to the very sad news of this 5-year-old boy who was running out to embrace his father only to be brutally shot by those that were trying to hijack him. Are criminals in South Africa becoming more brutal by the day?
Good evening, Lego. Yes, it's a very sad news indeed. We see there are two things that we noticed over the last quarter in terms of hijackings. The first one is that it became more violent, and the second one is that these hijackers became more brazen as well. We also saw that there was, in the last quarter, there was a 6.5% increase in hijackings, especially in the Gauteng area.
And is this to send out a message to the community that once they do approach you, you should let go if they're being more violent and more brazen? What strategy do you think they're trying to implement, even psychologically, to the communities that they target with these hijackings?
Yeah, all the experts are warning or actually advising people not to resist. It's normally when people do resist when these criminals are then using force. The best advice there is not to resist. But we also see that they are using new techniques. They are, like this one that happened in Soshanguve. They parked behind the bakkie when it arrived home, so it blocked it. It couldn't reverse, couldn't go forward. What we also see a new trend is that at some of your fast food outlets, they block your car in. A car would stop in front of you, a car would block you from behind, and then they will get out. They will pull you out of the vehicle and they will drive off with your vehicle. So those are just some of the techniques that they are using nowadays. So if you resist, chances are good that they might use these their firearms.
And a little later on, Willem, I just want us to touch on how people can prevent or rather take care of themselves when they are in situations of that kind. But when we speak about crime in South Africa, and especially when it comes to hijacking and some of the violent crimes that we are seeing lately, we often put it to socio-economic issues, unemployment and joblessness, as well as poverty, where young people are driven to go out and find other sources of income in order for them to be able to survive. But how do we then define and quantify the brutality of a 5-year-old being killed? I don't think a 5-year-old would possibly be a threat in such a situation.
You're so right, because also apart from all of these socioeconomic challenges, these criminals are very opportunistic. They are very greedy, because if you look at the vehicles, these vehicles are close to R1 million apiece, and we see that 66 of them are being stolen per day today in South Africa. So it's a lot of money involved. It's a lot of greed involved by these people. And of course, like you mentioned, this child was not a threat to them. So the criminality in South Africa is really worrying. Other countries are also challenged with similar challenges as us, with unemployment, et cetera, but the levels of violence in South Africa is really out of hand.
You mentioned the number of vehicles that are stolen per day. Could you perhaps take us through maybe some of the makes in terms of color that are at more high risk and more in demand when it comes to criminals?
Yeah, you've got various reports about these vehicles. They are, they've got the top 10 vehicles in terms of brands. And if I may name these brands, your especially your 4x4 or your 4-track or 4x4 bakkies are very popular, and that is your Toyota as well as the Ford. That is very, very popular. We see that your Volkswagen vehicles, the Polos, are very popular to be hijacked and stolen. Also, your Nissan bakkies, the small ones. So those are just some of them, but we should not forget that they say that in some of the provinces, the third most vehicle that is being hijacked is actually a motorcycle. So even motorcycles are becoming more and more a target of these thieves.
And when we speak of supply and demand, who are they selling these cars to?
Yeah, what's happening? They say more or less one third of these people, or 30% of these vehicles, are crossing our borders. We saw quite a lot of successes. The Minister of Police signed an MOU not too long ago with his counterpart in Mozambique. We also saw that they recovered and they managed to stop some 60 vehicles there. We also saw quite a few successes that with intelligence-driven operations towards the north, towards Zimbabwe border. A lot of these vehicles are going across our borders, and they are being sold as far away as Kenya and Tanzania and DRC. But what we also see is a lot of these vehicles are being stripped for their parts, and there they are sold within South Africa. We also saw one indication that some of these spare parts are then packaged into containers, and in two occasions, it was discovered that some of these containers were just destined for countries like Mauritius, where these stolen parts are then exported to.
So this really is quite an extensive market with regards to how these parts are sold well beyond our borders. When we now speak of the local enforcement strategies that are being put in place, I mean, how are we seeing like the South African Police Service responding to such challenges in terms of resources and strategies, especially in townships such as Soshanguve?
Yeah, one thing that we should understand is that the police is currently challenged with resources. We don't have enough police boots on the ground. That's the one thing. Our intelligence is also not what it's supposed to be. Our crime intelligence is picking up, but it's been really been in trouble. So we see that there is some recovery in their capacity, but it takes time to build your intelligence, because if you don't have credible intelligence on these things, you are working blind, and you mostly work reactive. So that is one of the things that the police should really look at to strengthen that. And also, we see that in most of your incidents where there are successes, we see that it is in combination with some of your private security companies. So it is very important that the police and these security companies work together, embrace and join forces in order to curb this. But one thing that we should never forget, these criminals, I know that the trust levels in the police between the police and the public is not what it's supposed to be, but these criminals are living amongst us, and you know the public are the eyes and the ears of the police, and I think if the public must become more involved, because these people bring those vehicles, they store these vehicles around us, they see these things happen. If they start to report that to the police, I think it will also contribute towards the successes of the police, and also to a decline in these types of crimes.
Most certainly, Willem. I mean, it's a very important point that you make there with regards to communities being the ones to stand up and speak to the police when they see them being the eyes and ears of the police service. You speak about the dwindling intelligence and the lack of resources within the SAPS. Is this a direct correlation between that and the increased number of crime in our country?
I think so, yes. You know, South Africa, crime is opportunistic, and whenever there's a rise in crime, or whenever there's opportunity, the criminals will pound on that. Your challenge is, you know, if you can rob a bank, and your chances of being arrested and pushed through court is less than 30%. I mean, the odds are good. So that is our challenge. You know, if the criminals lose their fear of the police, or the respect of the police, they don't fear of being accosted, don't fear of being arrested and being put in prison, then you know, you will find an increase. So what we need to do with the police need to really look at have a real look at their strategies. We need strong leadership at the top, and all those strategies must then be filtered down and implemented down, and it must be backed up by resources. For instance, we have this Operation Chanela that is really they arrested more than 600,000 people since they started now. But remember, each and every one of those people, or those suspects that have been arrested, have to be charged within 48 hours. They have to go to court, and a case file must be opened and then investigated. But we have such a shortage of detectives in the police that, many of those cases will be closed, and all will not be investigated sufficiently and then prosecuted sufficiently. So that leaves a big gap in our legal system that does not play out well for us, because justice will not be served in many of these cases because of lack of resources, lack of manpower, and also our lack of capacity.
Speaking of Operation Chanel, I mean, it currently is in full swing tonight. And what I wanted to find out from you is that with such operations, we do get the commissioner coming out and giving us the numbers, like you've said, of those who are being arrested. Does this act as a deterrent for criminals when they go out? Or, like you say, because of the lack of trust and fear of the police, operations such as Operation Chanel don't matter to them?
I think so. This is one of the very important pillars of crime prevention. It's one of your strategies of crime prevention that proves to be very effective. But what I said and what I mentioned is that it's no use to arrest the people and you can't push them through court and get a conviction at the end of the day. So that is why it's very important that when you have a strategy like this, like Operation Chanel, that is actually very effective in terms of arrest, it should be backed up by the resources and all the backup of the detectives, etc., that will be able to investigate. But that is not the only problem. Our prosecution authority is also under stress, so they will have to strengthen our prosecutors in order to prosecute all of these cases. Because remember, South Africa is just overwhelmed at the moment under the burden of this crime wave that is sweeping over the country. And the only way to stop that is if there are consequences. If you want to commit a crime and you start to fear the consequences of your deeds, then you will think twice before you do that. And these consequences, being arrested, being put through court, and ending up and doing some time in prison, that is an excellent deterrent for these criminals. So we should focus on that, and we should strengthen the hand of our men and women in blue when it comes to that.
Most certainly. Willem, thank you so much for your time this evening.